How is it going, everyone? So this is going to be another video in our series of intro how-to guides for True Terrain 5, and in this one we're going to be talking about terrains and the geometry. We won't be discussing shaders or scatter system in this one, but we will be talking about how to actually create terrains and what those options do. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. In the N panel we can see that you'll have an option for True Terrain 5, and by default the geometry tab will be highlighted. So in here you only have two options right now: create terrain, which you can click, and bake object to height map. Bake object to height map is grayed out because we don't have any objects selected. The other option, create terrain, this is where we can build terrains. So if we click this option, we'll see that a new terrain appears in our scene, and it is by default 1000 meters by 1000 meters in size. And the default resolution of this is going to be 256 vertices, which is 256 by 256, and that is the vertex count from across the Y and the X axis. The default option that is selected for the resolution of the terrain is a fixed grid setting, and a fixed grid setting means that whatever value is in here will always stay the same regardless of the size of the terrain. So if you see down here, this face value, the vertices, vertex value, doesn't change based on the sizes of the terrain, but the perceived detail will change. So if your terrain is larger, then it will perceptually look less detailed with the vertex count at 256 than if your terrain is smaller, where it would look more detailed. The other option is the density option, and this works by using a progressive, I guess would be the term. You set a resolution, and then that resolution is a multiplier of whatever this value is. So if it's 1000 meters, that's 1000 by 1000, and your resolution is set to 1. That means for every meter there will be a vertex that's generated. So 1000 by 1000 would equal 1,000,000 vertices because we have this resolution set to 1. If we set this to 2, that would be 1000 by 1000, or 2000 by 2000, sorry, which would be 4 million vertices, which we can see down here. The benefit of this option is that regardless of the size of your terrain, the perception of detail stays the same. There would be no loss in detail if we increase the size. You can see outside of some sort of recalculation jitter for the faces, you can see that the detail stays the same regardless of that size. So this is a valid option if you want to have a terrain that you're going to adjust the size of dynamically at some point. You will keep that detail available. The other option that's available when in the density mode is this little toggle here. If you use split size, then you can set different sizes across the terrain, so you can have it longer than it is wider. You can set up any sort of non-square shape, any rectangular shape that you'd like, using this split size option. Whenever you untoggle this, it will fall back to whatever the size value was that you had. So this is a fixed set of options. Like, these will never move regarding on where you change in the geometry tab. The same can be said for the height settings. So the height settings are global. All of these settings are global. They won't affect any individual layer on an individual basis. They will affect everything globally. And the same can be said for the height multiplier. Let me set this to a lower viewport amount. The height multiplier will affect globally the whole grid. Like, so whatever layers you've got set up, it will adjust all of them. And again, for offset, it will do the same thing. It will move that anchor point up and down. For multiplier, you can swap this from sort of an arbitrary figure, which is just a number that looked right. There's no physical properties tied to this. You can swap this to a height range, and then you can limit the amount of height that is used. So if things can't be any higher than 200 meters, then you would lock them off at 200 meters. You can set this to 500 meters if you'd like, and then and that will fix those to that. the same for the offset option. So by default, offset is set to the middle point, and this means that any adjustments happen around this midpoint here. You can set this to any of these toggles. So lowest means that nothing will go past the lowest point, and highest will mean that nothing will go past the highest point. So any values that you change, you can see it's locked at this high point. By default, middle is what most people in testing preferred, so that's why it is set the way it is. So now that we understand the global settings, let's move on to layers. Now, what are layers? Why are they important, and how do they work? So layers appear in this window here. This is your layer window. From here, you can see whatever layers that you add and whatever group layers that you create and combine. A layer is added by using this plus button. When you click this button, you will give an option of 4 layer types and a 5th option for a group system. The default layer that is applied when you create a terrain is the terrain noise. And terrain noise is a procedural terrain layer. So with this, you can see if you adjust the seed, it randomizes things as such. And if we adjust the roughness and the linearity, which I always say wrong, you can change how all of this looks. The other options for layers are Heightmaps, which if you followed the first video, you would have installed. So let's show you what a Heightmap is. A Heightmap, for those who don't know, is a baked out image. This image is a specific type of image. It's usually black and white. And this holds data in the pixels for height, so up and down values. And with this, you can make very minimal changes because it's not procedural, it's all baked. So the only options that you usually have for an image texture would be to change the type of extension that's applied to this. So if we were to use like repeat, you can see that it will, if I just scale this down, it will tile, which doesn't look great if you don't have tileable Heightmaps. Extend, which will just sort of stretch it out to the edges. Clip, which will just cut it out. It will do nothing with the extension on the edges of the image. And mirror, which will allow you to just mirror that. Ideal for non-tileable images, but you will immediately start to see repetition. You will see repetition with a tileable image anyway. So let's remove the Heightmaps and let's move on to the next option, which is textures. Textures are the procedural textures that Blender offers. So this is any of the standard texture nodes that you find in shaders or geometry nodes. And these range from brick, checker, gradient, noise, environment, and wave. And the final option is Plateaus. Plateaus is again procedural, something that we've built, and this is the sort of mesa formations or rock formations that you find in deserts and canyons. You can move these around. Again, you can rotate them using the standard transform values, but then you do have extra options here. So you can change the count of plateaus that you have. You can change the distance between those. You can change the radius of these. You have options within these. So if you ever see a drop down panel, these are like sub options that you can choose, where you can adjust any sort of random variations that are applied. And these are the 4 layer options that you've got. So let's move on to groups and how they work. You can create a group, and then inside of this group, let's call this I am a group. To access a group, you just click the group icon, and then once you're inside, you can then add new layers. So we can move layers around, do whatever we want with them. Add another one. Let's add a texture layer. Let's change it to noise. Let's move this around. Set the mid-level low, so we can mix them. Let's go to the blending options and adjust how they blend together. You can also move things out of a group into a group by using the traverse option. So we can click this toggle and we can move this into the new group, and as you can see, it's now in a group. You come back out of a group by clicking the root button or the name of the folder above it, and then you can then move that group around, which is separate to the layer inside, which you can move separately and then move it around. This is your layer system, so these are what the layers are, and this is your layer control tab. So let's move into blending and an understanding of what blending is. So the blending tab is how you mix those two layers together. There are options for this in the form of modifiers. Let's grab two noise values and let's move this one over here. Let's rotate it around a touch and let's change the height multiplier and maybe the random seed. There we go. So this is our top layer of noise, which you can move around independent of the layer below, and you can select the other layer to move those layers. In blending, by default, we use a mathematical value. It is smooth maximum, and what this does is it takes the point of the previous layer and maps it to points of a similar value to the other layer and allows you to blend those together with an extra value so that you can blend them seamlessly, and the higher this value is, the smoother that blend is that happens, and the overlap of pixels or faces between those layers becomes less apparent, or more apparent that they're overlapping and less that they're not. You can change this value to any of these mathematical functions. So if you just want to add the two layers together, you can do that. You can just add them, and you can see we can move layers beneath. We can change this to subtract, so you can subtract one layer from another. All of these are sort of at your disposal. The other option that you have is you can disable any addition or any mathematical function completely, so that if you move the layer underneath, you cannot see any changes, because now this layer above it has overwritten the information completely. And this is where you can start to add modifiers. So if we add a blending modifier, and let's use the distance mask, because this one will be easy for me to visualize for you. Let's just add in an empty. So I'm going to add a plane axis empty in here. I'm going to scale this up so we can see this. And on this layer, I'm now going to choose the empty. So I'm going to use the eyedrop tool. And if I move that empty around, I now have somewhere where it's going to blend between those distances. It can increase the distance that the blending happens. And this means that if I grab my empty, I can now move this around and the blending happens between those 2 points. Most of the blending options come with an option for fall off of some kind. So the fall off that we would be seeing here would be this effect here, and we can change how the fall off works, what kind of fall off is used, whether we use a normal based fall off, which is like noise, or whether we use a circular one, which will just radiate out in like a star kind of pattern from the center. And you can change the density values of like whether this is going to be completely one point or if it's going to be another point. These are all options there. Another option that we could use for blending between 2 points would be something like the height mask. So if you only want points between a certain height range to blend, we can do that. So let's say the maximum height here is 25. Well, we can add some fall off now to create this blend here so it's not as harsh. And as you can see, we can soften that area out. And if we move this around, any points on the mask below and the maximum height above will now be blended based on those values. And if we move this mask underneath, you can see that we're cutting off those values in that mask. This is how the blending works. In terms of modifiers for blending, there are many options, but they're all just a way of blending layers between each other. They don't do anything other than just blend between two layers. The modifiers panel, which is just modifiers right now, has options for other specific things to that layer. So it won't blend between layers, it is a function to modify that specific layer. So let's have a look at the terracing one, for example. So if we come, not too sure what's happened there, a bit of an odd quirk. So let's add the terracing modifier. So you can see that we've just added some terracing here. We can change the height of those cliffs, and we can change the width of those, and now this gives us a terraced effect. You can change the opacity of this modifier at any point, and the same we can do for like the curve modifier. So let's go into the curve modifier top down view. Let's remove this. With the curve modifier, you basically can just draw a curve at any point. Once you click the pencil button, a curve will be drawn. We can see that curve there, and with that curve we just come out of edit mode and we can just grab it and move it up and down, and you can see that we can generate points around the curve. We can add some terracing back in. Let's move the terracing below the curve, and let's set the cliff height to something like 50, and if we grab our curve again, you can see that this will now affect how these are formed. All of the modifiers are a per layer modifier. So if we remove you and add something like the inflate option, this will inflate this layer, but it doesn't work across the stack of layers, if that makes sense. And this is how the geometry and modifiers work. So that we can get a better understanding, we're going to quickly mix a couple of layers together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpin this, I'm going to delete this terrain, create a new terrain, and let's mix some layers together so that we get a better understanding of how all of this works. We've got our base terrain noise. Let's add a height map, and with this height map we're going to choose one of the ones we've just installed. We'll just grab a mountain for now. We can move this mountain around. You can see that it's clipping the layer underneath. So let's go to our blending tab, and let's leave all of these values as they are, and let's create a new blending mask, and we're going to use the zero edge border mask. And what the zero edge border mask will do is it will create a border of flatness. Let me just pin that. So this option here in the zero edge border will pin the zero edge border to the layer. So if we move it around, you can see that we're pinning that information, and we can adjust the distance of this and the fall off of this this mask. Now we've done that, let's make some changes to the fall off. Let's add a little bit of detail to the fall off, like so. And the randomize, again, let's add some more randomization. Let's change the amount of randomization. Let's add some detail. Perfect. Let's turn our previous layer back on. Now you can see that we're mixing between these two layers using a zero edge border and a math function. I want to soften out this curve here of the zero edge border. So there's a couple of things that we can do. We can change this from a type of position to a shape, so we can make it a square, a heart, a diamond, whatever it is we want to do. These are all the options that you can change for shapes. I'm going to leave it on position, and I'm just going to change the way it falls off. So if we click the fall off easing form and we set it to any of these, we'll be able to see how this fall off changes. And the fall off is the point where this ends and this begins. So if we set this to like 150 meters, where this radiates out from the center, so 300 meters outwards, this is this point, and then the fall off would be from here to wherever else the fall off lands. So you can see when we added the external handle on, we can see that the distance changes. If we turn that one off, we can see that that softens out. we can go for another type. We can go sine wave, we can go cubic, we can go elastic, where we can see it will bounce back on itself. We can use the bounce function, or you can create a custom one, and a custom one will come up with this new panel, the little cog here. If we click on this, we can adjust how we want that fall off to happen. We can create whatever kind of curve we would like with this custom fall off, and then when we move this around, you can see that curve and fall off will follow along. So I'm not going to use custom for now. Oh, I will. Do you know what? I'm going to reset the entire curve. We're going to bring this up slightly and bring this down slightly. And maybe bring this bit in a bit here. So it's a bit softer. With this, we can move this around. And we're going to increase the size of the terrain a touch. And I'm going to grab this mountain and I'm going to rotate it. If you see the rotation act a bit odd like this, just click the layer below and click back on that layer, and you'll see the rotation pivot point changes. And we're just going to scale this up over here and put it in the background a little bit. And then what we can do is go back to the layer tab. We can just increase the height multiplier for this and just keep scaling up until we get something that we like this. And if we have a look at our terrain with a resolution of 1, turn off our widget overlays, we can see that we've blended a mountain directly into the noise layer below. And we can also go back to the blending tab and we can adjust how soft this fall off is. So if we go to like a 15, we can see that the edges moved up ever so slightly there. And we can come to the layer below, and this is just too noisy for me, so I want to soften this out. I'm going to go to modifiers. I'm going to add in a terrace modifier to add some terracing to this, so we get this nice effect. I'm going to increase the surface width to 0.6, and then I'm going to decrease this to something like 30 so that we can see more cliff heights. And then I'm going to add a final one. It's going to be the blur modifier, just so that we can soften up this terrain a touch. Add 2 iterations, and now we've blended pretty smoothly between a mountain and a noise layer below. And if we change the viewport amount to something like 0.25, come back to this and enable our gizmos again, we'll be able to see just how these things can move around together. And if we want, we can grab this, we can duplicate this layer. So we're just going to duplicate by clicking this function here. This layer is now duplicated. We can move it over here, we can rotate it around a touch, and let's rotate it like this, and you can see those 2 layers are going to blend together with each other. So we can see that we're blending these 2 layers together. We can reduce the blending a little bit, and we've kept the 0 edge border that we set earlier, and now we've got 2 mountains blending perfectly into this below. Thank you for watching this video. In the next video, we're going to go over shaders and how to add shaders to your terrains. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next one.